Hi, my name is Tasha. In this segment we're talking about the disintegration of the soul. When we're focused purely on the physical body, we actually are disintegrating our soul, and it would take us millions of lifetimes to bring that back. So here's one of my greatest teachers who will explain this to you. Here he is.
Enforcing, inhibiting control. And this is one pathway which will lead to the disintegration of the soul, because it is a continued resistance which we perpetuate, which will bring about complete identification with matter on this pathway, which will literally lead to the disintegration not of the body, but the actual disintegration of the soul. And we go into a state of what they call the second death. The first death is the death of the physical body that we identify with. The second death that we enter into is the death of the soul, which will take place over many, many millions of years as a person continues this pathway until they can reverse it. Okay, and the reversal will be the knowledge which you're obtaining from these classes. And then we can reverse this downward spiral into identification with matter by reversing it with the concepts of unconditional love and unconditional forgiveness on each little. The second pathway toward the disintegration of the soul is starting from the initial space of time, where we follow a pathway where we desire to be controlled. This nurturing aspect of wanting to be controlled, the desire to be controlled, is where I jokingly say, possibly I'm on this pathway. You know, we take a look at where we are. Sometimes there's mixed pathways, but I never get lost. People tell me where to go. And that's a very comfortable aspect. That's a very comfortable aspect, because as long as Big Brother is there watching over, telling us what to do, and the state is in control and taking care of us, and as long as they give us a job and a place to stay and food to eat and so on, and the state takes care of us, you know, and then you have the bureaucrats who are very willing to be controlled and tell people where to go, how much to produce, where to live, where their home is going to be, how much to eat, and they parcel it out like little misers, you know. The bureaucrats will be on one end of wanting to control, and then you have other people who are perfectly willing to be controlled.
Particularly since 2012, people have embraced tantric sex training on a massive scale. People even love being controlled in their own bedroom in the intimate times by people who love to control other people for their own personal gain. It is an agreement between those who feel the need to be controlled and those who must control others. Understand, this is all about control and resistance. This is where the death of the soul begins. You are creating many lifetimes of misery. Remember that. So here he continues.
Because they are secure in that particular aspect of having their whole life controlled for them. Now, let's see where we fit somewhere between these two extremes. And sometimes we don't have a black and white situation, but we'll have shades of gray in between. And maybe certain areas we do desire to be controlled, while other areas we exert our fierce independence. And these things will be areas that we'll have to consider carefully. But in the desire to be controlled, if we're not being controlled sufficiently, then we start to do what is necessary to get people's attention around us where we must be controlled. And here's where little children sometimes that are on this pathway are very, very happy when they're being disciplined and they're doing what they can to attract people's attention, so they will be controlled. And then they're content because they're being controlled, because control is equated oftentimes, somebody loves me because they're controlling me. And here's where we get into the equations of A equals A, where love equals control. And they feel if they're not being controlled, not being given the attention to and told what to do, then there's no love. Are you with me on this? Now, every single human being will have elements of both the control or the elements of being controlled. They'll have the elements of cause, they'll have the elements of being the effect. So we go from the element of must being controlled, which is enforced being controlled, where we'll do what's necessary to force others to exert their control upon us, where we have to be controlled. And then eventually we reach a point, if we fail in this endeavor, we then reach a point where I can't be controlled. And here's where people are so far out of control that they can't be controlled either by their own self or by other people, and here's where people become totally reactive. Now, when we analyze this in depth, carefully, and go deep into the psychology of the human mind, we find that we are basically on one pathway, on one pathway or another pathway. And each pathway, depending upon our continued resistance, will lead us down the pathway to the disintegration of the soul, which is the rejection within ourselves of our own God energy, the recognition of our own I am concepts that we have discussed, and by denying this particular aspect of our lives, we continue to look for solutions for control and for solutions to be controlled outside of ourselves, and we look for that solution there with our continued resistance to those factors until we literally become totally conditioned by the environmental circumstances around us, and at that time we become totally identified with matter, where we have no memory as to how we set up our own game plan. Now this becomes quite difficult, and it becomes quite difficult to resist these patterns. It becomes quite difficult to go through the concepts which cause us to be in this out of control situation in either aspect, okay? Because our memory is occluded by the resistance, the emotional resistance of pain that we have incurred by inflicting it on other people, which then boomerangs back on ourselves, or having it inflicted upon us, which then boomerangs back on ourselves. So all of these things here fit in together at a very, very deep level.
As a result of working with over 40,000 people from all walks of life in every aspect of their life, including some in the dying process, my work brings all elements together that you'll hear in client recordings. I do not do that by bringing the soul, body and spirit together simultaneously. I've had remarkable mentors in spirit, body, mind, emotion and in business. Is that happy life in physical body involves all of these elements. So thank you for listening, and let's see you on my client recordings videos so you can be in the presence of their experience. Thank you.